"Get your filthy car off this street before I call the cops." That's what she screamed, her voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet evening air. I froze mid-step, keys still in my hand, standing beside my silver Honda parked neatly in my own driveway. She stood across the street in a pink robe, one hand clutching a wine glass, the other already holding her phone to her ear. "Yes, 911? There's a suspicious man here, Hispanic. He looks dangerous." Her perfume and cheap Chardonnay mixed into a sour cloud that drifted across the lawn. For a moment, I couldn't believe it was happening. After 8 years on the bench, I'd watched people twist the law to justify their worst instincts, but never had it followed me home. My name is Marcus Rivera. I'm a municipal court judge, a father, and apparently, in my new neighborhood, a criminal, for parking in my own driveway. As red and blue lights flashed at the end of the block, she smiled, convinced she'd won some invisible war. What she didn't know was that in 3 weeks, she'd be standing in my courtroom and I'd be the one wearing the robe. What would you do if someone called the cops on you for coming home? It wasn't supposed to start this way. 6 months earlier, I'd stood in this same driveway holding the house keys like they were a second chance. After a long, bitter divorce, this was meant to be a fresh beginning for me and my 16-year-old daughter, Sophia. "Dad, this place actually feels normal," she said, spinning in the empty living room, her laughter echoing off the bare walls. Maplewood Estates had wide streets, trimmed hedges, and just enough peace to make you forget the world could be cruel. I told myself we'd found our safe place. Across the street, the woman in the pink robe, though I didn't know her name yet, watched us unpack. She smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. 2 days later, I found my first welcome gift, a bright yellow HOA violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper. "Unauthorized vehicle, commercial tint," it read. Commercial? It was a family sedan, the signature at the bottom, B. Whitmore. I would soon learn those initials ruled this neighborhood like a crown. At first, I tried to laugh it off. Bureaucracy gone wild. But that night, as I mowed the last strip of lawn, I noticed her porch lights flicker on. She stood there, arms folded, recording me on her phone. "Evening?" I called out. No response. Just that camera, trained on me like a spotlight. When I went inside, Sophia was at her bedroom window, frowning. "Dad, why is that lady filming you?" I didn't have an answer that would make her feel safe. The next morning, a police cruiser idled by the curb. The officer stepped out, polite but cautious. "Sir, we got a report of possible unauthorized parking," he said, reading from his notepad. I gestured to the house number above the garage. "That would be my driveway." He smiled awkwardly, muttered something about misunderstanding, and left. From across the street, she watched through half-closed blinds. The first spark of anger lit inside me. I'd seen plenty of people misuse power, but this was personal. For weeks, I kept my head down. I focused on work, on Sophia's school, on pretending it didn't bother me. But little things piled up. A second violation notice: lawn height exceeds regulation. A photo of my car posted in the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "Suspicious vehicle seen again." Each petty strike was designed to remind me that I didn't belong. And yet I had done nothing wrong. Every document, every email, every rule, I followed them all. Sophia tried to stay cheerful. "It's fine, Dad, she's just bored." But one afternoon she came home in tears. "Emma told everyone at school you're a criminal. She said her mom said we're drug dealers because of your car." I felt my chest tighten. I'd handled murder trials, embezzlement, fraud, but nothing hurt like watching my daughter cry over lies. I sat beside her, my hand on hers. "Hey," I said softly, "the truth always wins. It just takes time." That night I stood at the window, watching the streetlights glow against her pristine lawn. Her sprinklers ticked in perfect rhythm, her house spotless, her world controlled. That control was her power, and people like her always believe their power is absolute. I thought about every defendant who'd stood in my courtroom, eyes full of excuses, prejudice wrapped in politeness, entitlement disguised as concern. I realized what I was dealing with wasn't just a nosy neighbor, it was a person addicted to control. And I'd just become her latest project. The next morning, the HOA emailed me a friendly reminder about community standards. My mailbox tilted slightly, they said. My grass could use edging. My recycling bin was visible from the street. Each note signed, "Regards, B. Whitmore." I replied once, "Thank you for your concern. Everything complies with city code." I kept my tone professional. Judges learn early that calm is the sharpest weapon. But inside, something shifted. If she wanted to test how far the law could go, she'd picked the wrong man to provoke. By Friday, her tactics escalated. Security cameras sprouted along her porch, all angled toward my front door. When I waved, she pretended not to see me. Later that evening, a city code officer appeared, clipboard in hand. "We received a report about your lawn exceeding ordinance height," he said apologetically. "I have to document it." I smiled. "Go ahead. You'll find it 3 inches, well within regulation." He measured, nodded, and left, looking embarrassed. Across the street, her curtains fluttered. She was watching. That was the night I finally let myself feel it, not fear, but resolve. I'd moved here for peace, but peace can't exist without justice. I poured a cup of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and began writing notes, dates, times, complaint numbers. Judges are trained to see patterns, and the pattern was clear. This wasn't neighborly concern. It was harassment, deliberate and escalating. As I wrote, Sophia wandered in, rubbing her eyes. "You're still up?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Thinking about tomorrow? Are you going to say something to her?" I shook my head. "Not yet. First, I'm going to learn everything about how she plays this game." Sophia leaned against my shoulder. "I hate it here sometimes," she whispered. I looked at her reflection in the window. "That's how bullies win, by making good people give up. We're not going anywhere." Outside, the neighborhood slept under perfect symmetry. Lawns, fences, driveways, all neatly aligned. Only one house broke the pattern, hers. She believed she could control who belonged and who didn't. She'd learned to weaponize the rules and hide behind them. But the thing about rules is, they only work if you understand them better than the person abusing them. And I did. When the sun rose, the same street looked different. The tension was still there, but so was a plan forming quietly in the back of my mind. I buttoned my shirt, kissed Sophia on the forehead, and told her, "We're going to be fine." She smiled faintly. "Promise?" "Promise." As I backed out of the driveway, I saw her again, coffee cup in hand, robe crisp, phone ready. Her eyes followed my car until it turned the corner. She wanted me gone. That was her endgame. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't some easy target to push away. I was a man who'd spent his life defending the rule of law, and I was done being silent. She had no idea the clock had already started ticking. By the end of the first month, her pattern had become impossible to ignore. Every week brought a new complaint, a new anonymous report that somehow always had her fingerprints on it. One afternoon, as I walked up the driveway with groceries, I noticed a fresh orange tag on my mailbox. Unapproved paint color. I laughed quietly to myself. It was standard issue gray, the same as every other mailbox on the block. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was testing how far she could push. That evening, my neighbor Frank came over. Retired detective, mid-60s, the kind of man who still carried himself like he was on duty. "Mind if I say something, Judge?" he asked, sipping the coffee I'd handed him. "She's done this before. A young black couple lived here 2 years ago. Same routine, calls, violations, rumors. They left within a year." He leaned back. "She targets families she thinks won't fight back." His tone was careful but steady. "You might want to start keeping records." "I already am," I said, sliding a small notebook across the table. "Every call, every notice, every interaction. I know how she works. I've seen her kind in court." "Then she's picked the wrong guy," Frank said with a grin. "But watch yourself. She's clever." The next morning I noticed something else. 3 houses down, a "for sale" sign had gone up. Another family leaving, another story buried under the polite silence of suburban order. It made me wonder how many others had packed up and left because of her. I opened my laptop and began searching property records for the past 5 years. Same pattern. Families of color or mixed backgrounds selling below market, and every single one of those homes had been relisted by a company connected to her real estate license. She wasn't just a bully. She was profiting from it. That discovery turned irritation into purpose. I wasn't just defending my peace anymore. I was gathering evidence for something much bigger. I filed a quiet public records request for all HOA complaints from the past 3 years. The results came back 2 weeks later. Over 75 anonymous submissions, nearly all traced to the same household IP address. Meanwhile, she kept escalating. Cameras now pointed directly at my living room windows. Delivery drivers started avoiding my address, saying someone had told them I didn't live there. One morning, Sophia opened the door to find our garbage can knocked over and a handwritten note taped to the lid. "Maybe you should find a neighborhood that fits you." I watched her hands tremble as she picked it up. "Dad, what did we do to her?" "Nothing," I said, taking the note. "That's the point. People like her need to invent enemies to feel powerful. But she's about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong one." Frank helped me install new security cameras, ones she couldn't see. We set them to record both video and audio. I made sure to place one near the driveway, another above the mailbox, and a third watching the street. Each clip fed into an encrypted cloud folder, evidence no one could erase. I also drafted a detailed timeline, dates, complaint numbers, police visits. Even the time she walked over to measure my grass with a ruler while pretending to talk on the phone. Sophia watched all this with a mix of fear and fascination. "You're really going to fight her, aren't you?" she asked one night as I packed another file folder. "I'm not fighting her," I said. "I'm documenting the truth. The truth will do the rest, but the truth has a way of surfacing faster than expected." A week later, I got a call from the city code department. "Mr. Rivera, we've had several complaints about your property. Noise, lawn, even accusations of illegal activity." The man paused, clearly uncomfortable. "They all came from the same number." I thanked him for confirming what I already knew. After hanging up, I called my friend Thomas, a civil rights attorney. "Sounds like you've got a textbook discrimination and harassment case," he said. "Just keep the trail clean. No confrontation, no shouting, just data." That night, as the crickets hummed and the neighborhood lights flickered out, I sat by the window and watched her porch. At exactly 10:30, her door opened. She stepped outside, carrying a small box, and scanned the street. I zoomed in on the camera feed. The box contained something small, plastic bags maybe. My pulse quickened. She crouched by my car, glancing around, then slipped something near the rear tire. I called Frank. "She's doing it right now." He arrived within minutes, quiet as a shadow, his phone already recording. From across the street I saw her freeze, realizing she wasn't alone. She hurried back to her porch, pretending to check her phone. Frank and I walked over together. "Evening," he said casually.
"Out for a late-night stroll?"
She stammered something about feeding the cat. Her voice wobbled. "You two are making me uncomfortable," she added, backing toward her door. "Funny," Frank said. "That's exactly how half the street feels when you're watching them." She vanished inside, slamming the door. I knelt by my car and found what she'd dropped, a small plastic bag filled with white powder. Sugar, not drugs, but close enough to frame someone if police hadn't looked twice. I placed it into a sealed evidence pouch, dated it, photographed the scene, and added it to my growing folder. The next morning she called the police again. "There's suspicious activity next door," she told them. But this time, the responding officer was Detective Sarah Chen, one of Frank's old colleagues. When she saw the footage and the fake evidence bag, her expression hardened. "She's escalating," Sarah said. "Keep your daughter close and don't engage. We'll handle it from here." For the next few days, things went eerily quiet. No notes, no visits, no new complaints. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Sophia began to relax. She even invited a friend over after school. But I'd seen this rhythm before. Bullies retreat only to plan their next strike. I spent that weekend reviewing footage and discovered something chilling. Late one night, her husband, Derek, had approached my driveway holding an envelope. He looked nervous, glancing around before sliding it under my door. Inside was a handwritten letter. "I'm sorry for what my wife has done. Please don't involve our daughter. She doesn't know half of it." Attached was a photocopy of a foreclosure notice. Their home was months behind on payments. Suddenly, her behavior made perfect sense. Financial desperation mixed with power addiction, a dangerous combination. Frank whistled low when he read it. She's cornered. People do stupid things when they're cornered. 2 nights later, my cameras caught her pacing her porch, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp with panic. "It has to look real," she whispered to whoever was on the line. "If the cops find it, they'll believe me." Then silence. That was the final push I needed. I called Thomas again. "It's time," I said. "She's about to cross a line she can't come back from." He coordinated with Detective Chen and a few federal contacts. We set up a watch, 3 unmarked cars stationed at corners, all cameras synced. I went to bed that night knowing she'd take the bait. At 2:15 a.m., movement. My phone buzzed with a live feed alert. There she was, dressed in black, crossing the street with a flashlight and a small plastic bag. I watched from my darkened window as she crouched beside my car, hand shaking as she taped the bag beneath the rear bumper. Every second recorded, every movement logged. A block away, an unmarked car's lights flashed briefly. Confirmation they had it too. She slipped back across the street, never realizing half the neighborhood's law enforcement network was watching. I exhaled slowly, the tension finally breaking. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to smile. The trap was complete. At dawn, I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Sophia. "You look like you slept better," she said. "Not exactly," I replied. "But I think things are about to change." She looked up from her cereal. "What did she do this time?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say the law she's been trying to use against us. It's finally about to catch up to her." Across the street, Karen's curtains moved again. She was watching, but she didn't wave. Maybe she sensed something had shifted. Maybe she didn't. Either way, she was running out of time. The morning after the trap, everything looked deceptively normal. The air smelled like freshly cut grass, sprinklers hissed, and birds called from the trees. Only the quiet presence of unmarked cars along the street hinted that something bigger was unfolding. I sipped my coffee and waited. Sophia was still asleep upstairs. Across the street, Karen emerged in her usual morning routine, robe, coffee cup, phone in hand. She glanced toward my driveway, saw the car still parked there, and frowned. For a long moment she just stared, then turned and disappeared inside. By 9 o'clock, 2 police cruisers rolled up. She had called 911 again, claiming I was dealing drugs from my vehicle. I stepped outside calmly as the officers approached. "Morning, gentlemen," I said. One of them nodded, looking uneasy. "We received a report," he started. "Mind if we look around?" "Not at all," I said, opening my garage. Within minutes, Detective Chen arrived, her expression unreadable. "We'll make this quick, Judge," she said quietly. The officers began inspecting the car, and within seconds, one of them found the small plastic bag taped under the rear bumper, the same one Karen had planted, from her porch. Karen watched with arms folded, that self-satisfied smirk painted across her face. "I told you he was trouble," she shouted. But the smirk faded when Detective Chen held up the bag carefully and said, "We've already seen who placed this here, ma'am. It's all on camera." Her mouth opened, then closed. The color drained from her face. "That's impossible," she whispered. Chen turned to me. "We've got enough to move forward. We'll take it from here." Within minutes, the street was crawling with agents. Karen was placed in handcuffs on her own porch, while her husband stood frozen behind her, speechless. Neighbors peeked from windows, whispering behind curtains. She screamed about conspiracies, about injustice, but no one listened this time. Sophia woke to the sound of sirens. "Dad, what's happening?" she asked, eyes wide. I knelt beside her. "It's over," I said simply. The truth won. The investigation that followed was bigger than any of us expected. They found bank statements, missing HOA funds, and even connections to illegal property sales. It turned out Karen had been manipulating the neighborhood for years, forcing out families, then quietly reselling their homes for profit through her real estate business. Every false complaint, every police call, every staged violation had been part of a long con. Within a week, her face was on every local news station. Neighborhood leader charged with fraud and harassment. The cameras that had once been her weapon were now broadcasting her downfall. Frank stopped by with a newspaper tucked under his arm. "Looks like justice finally mowed her perfect lawn," he said with a grin. "Justice has a way of finding people like her," I said. But there was still one more act to come. A month later, I walked into my own courtroom, robe freshly pressed, case files in hand. I'd been assigned to preside over preliminary hearings for community cases that day. When I looked up, I froze, not from surprise, but from the surreal symmetry of it all. There she was, escorted into the courtroom in a beige jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, eyes hollow. She looked smaller, like the air had gone out of her. She didn't notice me at first. But when the bailiff announced, "All rise for Judge Marcus Rivera," her head snapped up. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Recognition spread across her face, followed by pure disbelief. The same man she'd called the cops on for parking in his own driveway now sat above her in judgment. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said evenly, "you stand accused of multiple counts of harassment, falsifying reports, and property fraud. How do you plead?" Her voice trembled. "Not guilty, Your Honor." For a moment I thought she might faint. The room was packed with reporters, HOA members and residents who'd once feared her. They watched in stunned silence as she realized the depth of her mistake. I kept my tone steady, professional. "You will have your opportunity to present evidence. Until then, you are remanded to county custody. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck, echoing through the room like a full stop at the end of a long, painful sentence. Afterward, as the courtroom emptied, Frank approached. "You handled that with grace," he said quietly. "She'll probably never understand how lucky she was to face someone fair." "Fairness is all I ever promised," I said. "But she taught me something too, that silence enables injustice. You can't ignore it and hope it disappears." In the months that followed, the neighborhood changed. Without her control, Maplewood Estates became what it was always meant to be, a real community. The HOA elected new leadership. People started greeting each other again. Sophia made new friends, laughter returning to her voice. One Saturday, she tugged at my sleeve and pointed toward the park. "Look," she said, "they're having a barbecue. With everyone." Across the green, families of every background were gathered around grills, kids playing tag, music floating through the air. Frank waved from the crowd, holding 2 plates of ribs. "Get over here, Judge," he called. We joined them. The air was warm and easy, the tension that had once hung over the street completely gone. For the first time in a long time, I felt what peace was supposed to feel like, earned, not given. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from Karen's daughter, Emma. Her handwriting was neat, careful. "I'm sorry for what my mom did. She's getting help. I want to study law someday, maybe help people like you helped us." I read it twice, then handed it to Sophia. "Looks like something good came from all this," she said softly. "Maybe that's how justice really works," I said. "It doesn't just punish. It teaches." That evening, as the sun dipped below the roofs, I stood at the end of the driveway, the same spot where it all began. The same car, the same house, but everything felt different now. The street was alive with children's laughter, not suspicion. The air smelled like barbecue instead of fear. I thought about the night she called 911, about how certain she'd been that I didn't belong here. And I smiled. "You were right about one thing," I murmured to the quiet street. "Someone didn't belong here, but it wasn't me." The porch lights flickered on one by one as the neighborhood settled into dusk. I looked up at the stars, feeling the weight of it all finally lift. Justice doesn't always come loud or fast. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of peace you no longer have to defend. Sophia stepped out onto the porch beside me. "Dad," she said, "you really showed her, huh?" I smiled. "No, I showed her what happens when you underestimate the law and the people it protects." She leaned her head on my shoulder, the night warm around us. Across the street, the Whitmore house stood empty, for sale signs swaying gently in the breeze. A small symbol of how even the most perfect facade can crumble under truth. She called 911 because she thought I didn't belong in this neighborhood. I said quietly, "Now I'm helping build one where everyone does." Sophia squeezed my hand. That's better than revenge. It's the only kind that lasts, I said. The wind carried the sounds of laughter from the park, and for the first time since moving here, the street felt like home.